This is Alan Butler. We'll be back with Jonathan Bydlak to talk about the coalition to reduce government spending, and then we'll be rejoining our in-guest studio for our final segment. Let's talk about returning something to sender. How about returning some government spending, Jason?
Let's return it back to a level that at least balances the budget, reduce it as much as possible.
That would be 2003 spending levels.
2003 spending levels is a good start. I think we can do even better than that. Now to talk about ways that we can actually cut spending, ways that we can hold our elected representatives responsible, accountable, is Jonathan Bydlak. He is the president and president of the Coalition to Reduce Spending. You can go to reducespending.org to learn more. There are a couple interesting pledges that you guys have created. Jonathan, welcome to the show.
Yeah, thanks for having me on.
Jonathan, so the importance of reducing federal spending is clear to most everybody but the politicians and the Wall Street crowd.
True.
Which is most unfortunate. Now, how do you think you're going to be able to turn the tide here?
Yeah, so I think it all starts by putting candidates for office on the record. There are so many people who run for office and talk the game about being in favor of reducing spending and balancing the budget, and then they end up getting into office and, of course, do anything but that. And so, it becomes very difficult to sort of, when someone says, well, I'm for smaller government, well, what does that really mean? And so our goal is to basically say, well, we're going to define very clearly what it means to reduce spending and to balance the budget. And then when you're in office and you don't follow through on those promises, we're going to be able to say, here you are on record having said you supported this. And if you don't, then obviously, we can call attention to that fact. And so what we've basically done is we've created what we call the Reject the Debt Pledge, which basically has three tenets that we ask candidates to sign on for. It's pretty straightforward. The first is, I won't vote for an unbalanced budget. I think most of your listeners would agree with that one. The second is no new spending programs that don't have offsets elsewhere in the budget. So if you want to propose a new spending program, that's fine, but you need to cut spending somewhere else. And so that's actually built a lot on the work that Senator Tom Coburn of Oklahoma has done. And the third tenet is, that we shouldn't be increasing borrowing, which basically means, not raising the debt ceiling. And so, to sum it up, it's no unbalanced budget, it's no new spending, and it's no raising of the debt ceiling.
Jonathan, one problem that I see, we'll just take this last election cycle and the candidates that led John Boehner to become the House Majority Leader. Mm-hmm. And so many of them pledged all these things, and I cannot imagine a more crass violation of campaign promises than what we witnessed last August during the debt ceiling debate. Those weasels not only didn't do what they said they were going to do, cutting spending, and remember, they were going to introduce a bill to cut spending each and every week. They were going to roll back spending to 2008 levels. They were going to hold the debt ceiling. That went out the window the day they were in office. And to me, they say one thing, they do another.
Right. No, I think that's true. And I will say, though, that I think that there is clearly a sea change that's taken place in the last 5 years when it comes to federal spending. For a long time, fiscal conservatives were focused much more on the tax issue. And obviously, I think we're all in agreement that taxes are pretty high and shouldn't be increased. But that aside, spending always kind of took a back seat. And so, obviously this isn't going to change overnight, but I think that people are increasingly coming to the realization that, wait a minute, if you're going to, you can not raise taxes all you want, but if you're just going to continue to borrow and continue to print money, it doesn't really matter whether or not you raise taxes. And so, I think people can understand that that what we have is a spending problem. And so, you're right that you're going to have people who break their promises, and you're going to have people who talk about one thing and then end up doing something else. But there are a lot of people out there where that's not the case. I look at someone like Congressman Justin Amash from Michigan, who basically has been towing the line on spending reform, since he's been in office for the last 2 years. And that's a big addition, right? He wasn't in office, prior to 2010. I look at someone like Rand Paul, who's been, I think, very successful at sort of putting forward legitimate budget proposals that aim to cut spending and balance the budget, in the nearer term. And so, you're right that, you're not going to have
Jim DeMint, let's give credit to Jim DeMint. He kept Bush frustrated because he always opposed it.
Absolutely. And so, you do have these voices out there, and I think these voices are becoming, more numerous. But what you're really pointing out is that, the problem is that it's very difficult to tell, who are the people who are actually legitimately concerned with reducing the deficit and reducing spending, and who are those who are just talking in sort of amorphous terms. And so, like I said, this is where I think that really providing people with information about who is serious and who is actually walking the walk rather than just talking the talk, by being willing to say these are the concrete reforms that I'm in favor of, that does a great service to the voters, and I think does a lot towards moving the country in the direction that we need to move on this issue.
Well, Jonathan, I definitely agree that spending is the problem, and I really like the succinct, straightforward nature of this pledge that you are putting in front of our elected officials and candidates seeking office. What kind of support have you gotten so far? What kind of folks are out there willing to put their name on the dotted line and say that they are for these types of initiatives?
Well, so we haven't released our first pledge signers yet, but I will tell you that so far, which we'll be releasing in the next few weeks, we already have we have Republicans, Independents, and Democrats who have all signed on board, which is, I think, pretty impressive. And you're going to end up seeing some pretty prominent names in addition to some lesser known candidates. And so I think, like I said, there's my belief is that when you have an organization that focuses very narrowly on a very focused mission, you're able to put together a broader base of support. And that's sort of the notion that we're testing. And I think that we're really optimistic that we're proving this true. And so, to give you another example, Congressman Amash introduced a balanced budget amendment last year, and he had 12 Democratic co-signers. Now, he had more Republican co-signers, but he still had, 12 people from the other side of the aisle who signed on and said, we should balance the budget. And so our bet is that there is actually a niche out there for a group that's really trying to go and pull together all sides around this issue of reducing spending. And when you look at polling data, it kind of bears that out. Support for a balanced budget is just as high among political independents as it is among self-described fiscal conservatives, and even among those who identify as Democrats. It's generally right around 50-50. And so I think that one of the quips I made in an interview the other day was that no one's really debating the fact that the debt is a problem and it's something that needs to be addressed outside of maybe a couple of New York Times economists. But beyond that, everyone is in agreement, and so the question is, we've got to sort of build that coalition and get people on board who are in agreement that yes, the budget should be balanced, and yes, reducing spending is an important part of achieving balance, because that's the only way we're going to be able to pay down the national debt that we have. $1.3 trillion budget deficit, $15.7 trillion national debt. A CBO study that came out last week saying that within the next 20 years we're likely to have our public debt be at 200% of GDP, when it's taken us 235 years to get it to 100% of GDP. People are really aware this is a problem, and perhaps surprisingly, there are an increasing number of politicians and elected officials who are sort of awakening to this fact as well.
One data correction: if you take the unfunded liabilities, which every business would do using generally accepted accounting principles, our debt to GDP is in excess of 500%.
Right. Yeah, some estimates show it being at $100 trillion if you look at all the promises that are made through all the entitlement programs and what have you. It's really crazy. And
that balanced budget amendment, didn't even get to the first sentence before the word "but" came in.
Right.
So it was a show vote.
Well, some of them are, right. There were actually a number of proposals. Congressman McClintock of California actually proposed a balanced budget amendment that was focused on basically not increasing borrowing. In many ways, like I said, the pledge that we've put together is sort of inspired by some of the work that some of these other people have been doing, right. Us saying don't increase borrowing is very much we sort of borrow that notion from Congressman McClintock's balanced budget amendment. And so there are different ideas about how to do this, but you're right that in many cases, what we've seen from House Republican leadership, at times ends up being just like you said, a show vote.
Yeah. The language was not but unless. But you got the word "unless" inside the first sentence. It was nothing but political theater.
Well, Jonathan, quickly tell our listeners how they can learn more about the Coalition to Reduce Spending and what they can do to be a part of this movement.
Yeah, absolutely. So the best thing is to go to our website, reducespending.org. You can read the candidate pledge there. We have a lot of resources that sort of explain the problem with regards to debt and with regards to spending. We also have a voter pledge that we basically ask voters to sign to be able to show elected officials that yes, we take this issue seriously. We believe this is the most serious issue, and we're not going to end up supporting anyone who doesn't take this issue as seriously as we do. So signing the voter pledge would be great. Obviously they can make a financial contribution. They can fan us on Facebook, follow us on Twitter, all the social media, and just continue the conversation. That's the goal here. Is that when we keep talking about this issue, it's something that every day more and more people are awakening to. And
Jonathan, buddy, we got to run. Sure. Hard break here. ReduceSpending.org. Jonathan, it's been a pleasure.
Sounds great. Thank you.
This is Alan Butler. We'll be back with Jonathan Bydlak to talk about the coalition to reduce government spending, and then we'll be